of perjury?
Yes.
Thank you. You can put your hand down. And do you have any witnesses that are physically located with you that you intend to have testify today?
No.
Okay. All right. And Mr. Barrett, do you have any witnesses physically located with you?
No, sir.
Okay. We don't allow witnesses to listen into the proceedings if they're also going to give testimony. That's the reason we ask that question. And so anyone who would fit that description would just need to step to another room. So Miss Ivy, getting some basic questions out of the way first. The respondent is a DeKalb County resident to the best of your knowledge, correct?
Yes.
All right. And the two of you have a child together who is 16, is that right?
Right.
And you two do not live together and have not lived together recently.
Right.
All right. So talk to me about what's been going on over the last month or two that led to you filing your petition.
So recently my son was acting out this summer. And so me and his dad have been having conversations about him living with him. But I guess ultimately, because he has never really supported him, he decided not to allow him to live with him. And my son looks up to him. So it was nearing the end of the summer, and I'm almost 8 months pregnant. And so I wanted to make sure I have everything in order. Well, I reached out to his dad so that we can go ahead and get the school information handled and transfer and everything. But he ignored me. This was on July 21st because school started on the 1st of August. So by July 30th, because I had not heard from him and he told me that my son was at his house, I spoke to him. We arranged for me to pick up my son. So he texted me about 4:10 on July 30th and asked for my ETA, my time of arrival, or how soon can I get to a location at a certain time. So by 4:30, I texted him back and said, I'm outside. He never texted me back. Eventually, I was just sitting there. Eventually, he called me, and I didn't want to answer the phone because he's always aggressive on the phone. And for the last 2 weeks prior, he had been calling me, being aggressive on the phone. So
can you explain, tell me in a little more detail what that looks like, sounds like?
So he yells at me and insults me. So the last couple of times he, before the July 30th event, for the last 2 weeks, he had been calling me while I was at work, telling me that he's going to take my child to my grandma's house because I don't know what's best for my child. So I just stopped answering the phone. My grandma had been in the hospital unbeknownst to him, but he's always trying to involve my grandma in his business, and that stresses her out. So I have been basically begging to stop doing it and stop arriving at my grandma's house. So and again, he yells at me and he has a very aggressive tone with me. So I didn't answer the phone after I texted him at 4:29 and said that I was outside of the house. On the way there, he told me that my child was with him and he was at his house. So I came over there, texted him and said that I'm outside. He didn't answer. He didn't respond. He called me one time. I don't think I answered, but he called me again. And when I answered the phone, he said, "Get the F away from my house before I shoot you." And
Before I what?
Before I shoot you. And so when I got hysterical because I haven't done anything. I'm 8 months pregnant, and it just scared me that he not all of a sudden got aggressive, but he told me to come, basically. He told me to pick up my child, so I wasn't understanding. So I was hysterical, crying in the car, and I didn't drive off immediately. I called my mom, and she called him on another phone and had him on speaker. He told my mom that my child was in Alabama. He told me that my child was in Alabama as well on this same phone call while I'm sitting outside his house. So my mom told me to leave. I left. I went down the street to a gas station because my mind was everywhere. So about 30 minutes later, he tells my mom that he's going to bring him to my uncle's house, which is in Stone Mountain, near where he lives. But he never did. About almost an hour after I left his house, he showed up at my grandma's house. The only reason I knew was because I was getting calls from him over and over again that I wasn't answering. And then eventually I started getting private calls, and I came to my friend's job so that she can assist me with the situation. I had my friend call my sister in Alabama to see if my child was there. My sister said he's not there. And so I was at my friend's job when I was getting these private calls. My friend seen me getting the private calls and she answered. It was a police officer. So he had called the police on me while he was at my grandma's house with my child after only less than an hour before telling me that my child was in Alabama. So when I got there, I told my child to get in the car. And I looked at him and started to talk to him to see what was wrong, because I knew my son is very emotional and his dad is very manipulative mentally and emotionally to my child. So recently he told my son that I'm trying to get rid of him because I'm having another baby. So when I got my child in the car that day, I looked at him and began talking to him. I said, "Did you want to stay with your dad?" Because I knew that was why he was getting emotional. He looks up to his dad. He want to be around. I've never spoke bad about his dad. Never told him about our past, any bad, negative information. So he said, "Yeah, I wanted to stay with my dad." I said, "Well, you could have stayed." And so he began to get out of the car and get his things out of the trunk. I said, "Hold on, Chase, just wait. Let me talk to you really quick." I said, "Well, your dad didn't want you to stay with him. That's the only reason I was coming to pick you." I said, "Well, you could have stayed." And so he began to get out of the car and get his things out of the trunk. I said, "Hold on, Chase, just wait. Let me talk to you really quick." I said, "Well, your dad didn't want you to stay with him. That's the only reason I was coming to pick you up." He said, my dad told me that you were forcing me to come home." So this really upset my child. This was the very first time I actually told my son the truth about his dad and the fact that he's been lying to him. At the brink of the summer is when my son was contemplating suicide. And this started because besides just my sister had been lying to my child about me, and then his dad has been lying to him about me and saying negative things.
So let me jump in to try to focus some of this on a few of the questions I need to answer more clearly.
Okay.
So he made verbal threats to shoot you, you said around the end of July. And
It
that was verbally, correct?
Right.
Okay. Who else was present to hear that?
Well, I'm sure my son was in the house with him, but I don't know if he acted that way in front of my child. And I know he was at the home with my son. He told me that my child was at his house. So I seen his car there. I assume he was in the house when he said all of this, but I don't know if my child was in the room.
And when, forgive me, I'm going to sneeze in just a minute. I can feel it hanging there, so I may have to mute myself. But and when has there been physical violence from him toward you in the past?
All the time, which is why I decided not to ever be around him anymore. We actually broke up or parted ways. I say about 2012-ish when I was in college. Like there has been physical marks on me, an entire footprint of a shoe print on my back that made one of my friends call my mom and tell her about it. So
when was the last time, and you can estimate a year if you need to, or
I haven't been around him at all. Like I wouldn't allow him to be around me. Even when he pick up my child, he would tell my son to tell your mom to come outside. I refuse to be around him.
So you've been able to avoid violence from him by completely distancing yourself from him.
Right.
Now, you two were never married, correct?
Right.
Okay. Has he ever taken steps to legitimate your son?
Never.
Okay. And what is your son's living situation right now?
So right now he is in the home with me and he is going to school from here. The legitimation part, I have applied for child support about 7 times, and each time Mr. Berry has manipulated his way out of it by telling the child support office that my son does not live with me, and so nothing ever happened further.
Okay. And let's see. I'm not sure that I have any other questions at the moment. Let me turn to Mr. Barrett. Mr. Barrett, this is your chance to suggest questions that still need to be asked to the petitioner. Keep in mind that after this, you'll have the opportunity to testify if you wish to do so. Do you have questions that you believe the court needs to ask this petitioner?
As far as question goes, I mean, like you already asked who was present. Like I called the police twice that particular day myself. I met the officer there. Like everything that's being said, I have text messages from her sister. I have text messages from her. Um, I've been to child abandonment court. They told her not to come back because every time she came, I presented the documents and saying that I've intervened. I've been a part of my son's life. From child support court, she's never showed up to do the DNA test. They also told her not to come back there either because she never shows up. Everything is documented. Everything is documented. Everything. So with that being said, this is a total lie. Now, when I say it's a lie, I don't mind.
Okay, it sounds like we're going right on past the questions into statement territory. And if that's what we're doing, that's fine. But I do have one other question for Ms. Ivy before we do that. Ms. Ivy, did you intend to call any other witnesses today?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure before we moved on. So, Mr. Barrett, I need you to raise your right hand for me. Do you swear the statements you have made and will make today will be the truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. You can put your hand down. What else would you like to tell us today?
Basically, like I said, I have all the text messages. My son was initially supposed to come live with me. Every situation turns into an argument with her assassinating my character, whether it's on social media, whether she's contacting my daughter's mother to talk to her about me. I have all the messages in my phone. And every time it turns into an argument, I tell her, have a blessed day. You be good. You be safe. I'm not going to argue with you. There's nothing you can say to get me out my character. When I come pick my son, I ask that my son be subpoenaed to speak for himself because my son will tell you. I had my son when I was 17 years old. The stuff I like then, I don't like now. I have no reason to speak with her about anything. About anything. We don't get along, so I'd rather not speak to her. Alone, that's in the text messages. Alone. That particular day, she called. She been asking me to get my son back up here. Her and my son was about to get into a fight. My son ran back off to Alabama with her sister, which she's asking me to communicate with her because she's not getting along, which I was communicating. I have the text message for that as well. So when my son came back up here, he initially came. I told her sister not to drop my son off at my sister's house. He dropped her off at my sister's house. That's where my son was. So when he came to me, he went straight to my sister's house. And my sister called me. And I got on my sister. I was like, nobody called me and said he was coming over. I just talked to his mom. Nobody told me where he was going. From that point, she called me and said that could I meet her on Panola Road, which I have these text messages in my phone too. She asked me to meet her on Panola Road. I said, okay. Next thing I know, she shows up outside of my house. My exact words were, get away from my house. We don't get along. It's all in the text message. I keep every text message over years. We've never got along. And I try not to argue, not to call her name, not to say anything bad. I try to remain from every time she says something bad about my character to my son, it's like I just refrain from arguing with her. So with that being said, when she pulled up outside of my house, I said, leave my house. Me just being me to cover my own self, I called the police myself and let them know exactly what was going on, exactly what happened. And it's documented because I made the phone call. You have to make documentation when you call the police. So with that being said, after that, her mom called me and said, well, I'm sending police to your house and I'm sending police to Karen's house. Karen is her sister and that lives in Alabama. Her mom said she was sending police to both parties' houses because we were lying. Karen asked me not to let my son go back with his mom because he's having suicidal thoughts. He doesn't want to live with his mom. My son even told me out his own personal mouth that he asked his mom not to get on social media and assassinate my character, not to talk bad to him about me. And she's on my phone talking to me about her mom talking to my son bad about her, as well as me. So that's not healthy for my son, and that's a problem that my son has. So I'm asking that you guys talk to my son. My son is not going to lie. I don't need my son to lie for me about anything that's going on because it's the truth. So with that being said, after I spoke to her mom, I called her sister, which is Karen. I've been communicating with her. That's where my son had went to once they got into an altercation. She was like, Cleveland, don't let him go to the house by himself. Go over there with him. Don't let him do it by himself. I said, I don't want to get involved with them. I don't want to go back and forth. I don't want no conversation. She was like, Cleveland, put that to the side and go over there be with my nephew. My nephew not in a good headspace. I don't want anything to happen to her. I have the text message from that too, sir. She doesn't mind saying anything that happened herself either. So with that being said, I got my son a lift to his grandmother's house. I followed. I got in my car and I went over there. I called the police when I got there. She wasn't answering my phone calls. The police officer had to call her on the phone to get her on the phone. When she got there, I left. Not one time did anything get reported to the police officer about me shooting her, about me saying I'm going to shoot her or stalking her. Anytime I came to my son's grandmother's house, it's been to give my son money. It's been to give my son his stuff. My son will vouch for this himself. Last time I was at her grandmother's house, you can ask her grandmother. She asked me to step outside to speak to her. Nobody else knows she's pregnant. You called me and told me that you were pregnant. It's all in the text messages. Everything that you say to me, I keep in my text messages. I have no reason to lie. I don't mind taking a lie detector test. I will pay for it myself because I have no reason to lie. I did not one time threaten this girl, or have I ever.
Yeah, well, let me
her.
jump
I'm
in
an
here,
entrepreneur. I'm a young
ma'am.
black man. I don't have time for that.
Ms. Ivy,
That's
do you have
ridiculous.
questions that you believe need to be asked of this witness?
Excuse me, sir.
I'm asking Ms. Ivy if Ms. Ivy has questions she thinks the court needs to ask you.
I mean, I heard a lot of mistruths, but everything is going so fast, and I didn't have chance to write down any questions.
Okay. All right. The evidence having been closed, my ruling will be as follows. There are certain questions we have to answer before we are allowed to consider a protective order. And I'll say a few things before I get to all those questions. Some of the dynamics here are concerning, more so than between the two of you less so about what it means for the two of you interacting versus what it might mean for your son. It worries me for him as he moves forward into adulthood in terms of what it means for what he sees modeled in these interactions and the inflammatory kind of aggressive response that seems to come out, because you two are very much like oil and water. You just don't mix. And with all that said, before this court is allowed to grant a protective order, it has to find that certain specific acts have occurred. And there is a fairly specific list of how to grant a protective order. It has to what those acts are. And this is not a case where I can find evidence that one of those acts on the enumerated list has been committed in such a way that it allows for court intervention. So I believe what I'm required to do under these circumstances is dismiss the order. Now, the other thing I will say in this regard, you two have in some respects, I guess it's not really co-parenting. I guess it's separately taken on whatever portion of the parenting apart from the other one you've taken on, unless and until Chase is legitimated. The law says that the child only belongs to Miss Ivy. And what that means for you, Mr. Barrett, is that you don't have any custody rights or visitation rights until you go to the court system and establish them. And so if she, while there is no protective order in place, if she, as the adult in her household, as the adult in her household, she is free to decide whatever she wishes to decide in regards to things like custody and visitation until you establish that legal relationship and until you have a court order to substantiate whatever you wish to establish with them. Now, the other thing I will say in this regard, you two have in some respects, I guess it's not really co-parenting. I guess it's separately taken on whatever portion of the parenting apart from the other one you've taken on, unless